SVC, serious violent crime. They mostly dealt with the cash in transit matters, business robberies, and so on. So that was the one specialized unit most of us dealt with. And that would have been the case even throughout my time at head office as National Coordinator Organized Crime. We dealt with the various agencies that dealt with. So within the detectives, for example, as is with the Hawks, they also had specialized teams. They didn't call them task teams, but they had dedicated teams that would work with extortions, dealt with essential infrastructure theft, which was quite an issue. So we worked with teams that dealt with specialized matters. But the only specialized task team I did deal with was the serious violent crime unit at the time. When I became the head of IDAC, and IDAC itself, we only engaged then in terms of law enforcement in the main with the DPCI, which is the Hawks, with the South African Revenue Services, the Financial Intelligence Center, and we also deal with Treasury when we need to, have engagements with the Auditor General's Office, but we haven't had to work with the PKTT because that has nothing to do with our mandate at all. So there's no engagements with them or the work that they do, Chair.
Okay. We'll come to the PKTT a bit later. Just before we go any further, tell us about your office, the makeup of your office, how many people are employed, in which sections, and perhaps also an idea of the demographics in that office.
During a break, I'll be able to perhaps just give the junior counsel something to print out. But as an overview, the staff contingent as of yesterday, which includes myself, are 128. And that includes the investigating director, the head of investigations, 2 chief criminal investigators, 4 chief financial investigators, 4 project managers. And then across the board, we have senior and junior financial investigators, criminal investigators, as well as data analysts, and then senior and junior advocates. So it's a total of 128, 63 female, 65 male.
And the demographic breakdown?
I'll be able to, during a break, I do have it on my laptop. I will look at it and I will revert with the exact numbers of the demographics. Okay. And I would assume, you'll correct me, Chair, you're asking about the racial demographics of the office. That's not an issue. I will present it. I do have it on my laptop. I will just want to give you the exact numbers.
And how are people, personnel in IDAC, how are they appointed? Who appoints them?
So, Chair, there's nothing unique about IDAC in terms of the recruitment process. Bear in mind that we are a business unit in the National Prosecuting Authority, which in itself is a program of the Department of Justice. So the recruitment policy in IDAC is the recruitment policy of government as we follow it through the Department of Justice. You all would have to identify vacancies and positions to be filled. And these are then advertised. They are not advertised only internally, they are advertised externally. There's a screening process that gets done outside of my office. It is all corporate services that would do those. Persons are screened to see that they fulfilled the requirements, that they correctly filled in. We still do what they call the Z83 form as a form of employment in government. All of those are done. There's pre-screening, there's shortlisting. And in terms of the shortlisting, demographics play a role, both in terms of gender and color equity. Those are part of the equity principles of the NPA as well as the Department of Justice. So all of those factors are taken into account. A panel is pre-approved. We've got to send an approval for a panel. Also, it has to be constituted in terms of both race, gender, as well as qualifications. You cannot have, for example, myself chairing interviews for a data analyst. I might be out of my depth. but I could chair the interview for an advocate or a deputy director of public prosecutions or the criminal investigators. So we take all of that into account. Our panels are sent through to the NPA's head office, and depending on the level of appointment, some, if not most of those panels also have to be approved in the Office of the Director General of DOJ, as the Director General is the accounting officer of the NPA. And then those panels constitute themselves. Shortlisted candidates are then interviewed, go through a two-pronged interview process, which has also become part of what government requires. Ordinarily, in these kinds of positions, you just had an interview with panelists asking questions and scoring candidates. But where we have, especially the criminal and financial investigators as well as advocates, we have part two of the interview process, where they are either given case theories, scenarios, etc., and they have to then answer those. So there's a written portion, and also a question that seeks to determine their level of ethics and integrity in the way they engage with the question. So it's not a different recruitment process. It is a recruitment process that's followed by the department.
Do you, from time to time, chair some of these panels?
Honorable Chair and members, yes, I have. I have chaired panels for deputy directors of public prosecutions. I have chaired the panel for chief criminal investigators, chief financial investigators. I think that's, could have been the head of investigations, but I think that is it. I might have assisted where, oh yes, I do recall, I think late last year, ordinarily when you do the positions for state advocate or senior state advocate, we usually have a deputy director of public prosecutions chair. The deputy director from my office who was assigned to chair fell ill, quite ill, and so in order not to interrupt that process, we sought permission, as we do, that I take over as chair, but it was for a prosecution position.
Now, your husband is also employed in IDEC.
No,
No, not at all.
my husband is at Crime Intelligence, and he's been there from 7 July 2009, when the DSO disbanded, and so many of the investigators, collectors, operational support were also moved. Many of them then were moved to either state security and or crime intelligence, and that is where he found himself by virtue of the allocation of personnel given the disbandment of the DSO. He was never at IDEC.
So, my apologies, I was mistaken, I apologize. So your husband obviously knows and works under Lieutenant General Khumalo, who's the head of Crime Intelligence.
That is correct, Chair. If I remember correctly, that the then minister indicated that the DPCI has a judge, and the police have IPID, and IDEC has nothing. When IDEC and when the NPA Amendment Act was passed and came into being in August of 2024, when the bill was signed in May of 2024, part of the provisions was that there would be an IDEC judge. We saw the value therein because we engaged with the DPCI. We had also engaged with IPID. This is also something, now that I think about it, before the bill was passed, the DPCI, SAPS, and IDEC, or the ID at the time, had to engage. Then Minister Kele chaired the meeting. Ministers of Justice attended the meeting, as did the head of the Hawks, then General Labia, the DG and DDGs of Justice, Doc Mashabane and Kale Pillay. I attended as the ID, and the late Advocate Rodney de Kock representing the senior management of the NPA. And there were various aspects that we had to talk about, that we had to have a gentleman's agreement on, understanding what the implication of a permanent IDEC meant. And one of the issues that then Minister Taylor had raised was oversight. And we had all discussed it, and as part thereof in the bill, we requested that there be a oversight mechanism in terms of a judge to oversee IDEC, all complaints relating to IDEC, from the head through all of its personnel. This part of the program had to be dealt with by the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice has appointed chair, as you would see in paragraph 11, retired Judge Takalani Joseph Raulinga as the 24 as the inspecting judge for IDEC, which term commenced on the 11th of October 2025 and is for a period of 5 years. We would have to now engage the honorable judge so that we can work out the operating procedures, etc. But this is a recent appointment, but it was an appointment that was in the making, and the Department of Justice dealt with it. So to be clear, IDEC had no input, nor did the NPA, into choice of judge. The legislative provisions asked for a judge to be appointed, and that falls within the ambit of our minister, and she has duly made that appointment.
So, and that's quite a recent appointment.
That is correct, although it formed part of the legislation that came into effect on the 19th of August 2024.
24.
If I may,
Yes.
whilst this process was being dealt with by the Department of Justice, if there were any allegations against any members of IDEC, they would be dealt with. If there were criminal allegations, they are dealt with as the other allegations against NPA employees are dealt with. They go to the police for investigation. If there were issues that related to security of data, state security would become involved, and where there were issues of misconduct, the NPA has within its ambit also of HR, a unit that deals with discipline issues, and there's also the Office of Ethics and Integrity, where complaints could also have been made, just so that we do not create an impression that there was a lacuna in terms of dealing with issues of criminality and or misconduct whilst one waited for the appointment of the judge.
Does the terms of reference or the mandate of the judge, does it also deal with complaints against IDEC or any of its members, like a sort of an ombud kind of role?
It would operate exactly like the DPCI judge. Any and all complaints, be they from the public and or internally, and that is how we see it would operate.
When would you?
Yes, sir. May we Please take Honorable Nhlanhla.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I think
And,
the evidence letter did
and
not complete.
Let me welcome you to the meeting. Thank you so much. Good morning. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to be back. I think the evidence leader did not complete the oversight mechanism question. IDEC is established in 2019. The oversight mechanism is discussed in 2024. The inspectorate judge is appointed on the 11th of October 2025, which is less than 30 days ago. Now, from 2019 to up to date, how have IDEC been being oversighted? Where did they report? And all that. I think that's the part that is, I think it's incomplete. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Nhlanhla, it's much like what I indicated, that in the time that we waited for the appointment of the judge, we worked as is with all the matters within the NPA. Where there are discipline matters, they are dealt with in the disciplinary process. Where it was an issue that related to a presidential appointment, those matters are escalated as they should be to the office of the president, but there aren't any that I'm made aware of. Where there were criminal allegations, dockets are opened and those would be investigated. And where there might be allegations of compromise of data and information security, we have in the NPA the Risk and Security Division, who work very closely with state security, and those issues would have been or had to have been escalated there. So that is how it did work. But in terms of matters that I became aware of when I started as the head of IDEC, or ID in March 2022, we have had disciplinary issues where we've had allegations that arose against, for example, we had an advocate that joined us, but the allegations of corruption and criminality arose from his work at the office of the DPP. However, we dealt with it because we became aware of it. A disciplinary hearing was conducted. The employee was dismissed, and I know that the criminal matter continued in court. I'm not sure how far that matter went, but that was the course of how things were dealt with, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Malem.
Thank you very much, Chair. What is an oversight?
So the Honorable Malema, you ask in terms of the judge?
What is an oversight?
So oversight is where they exercise, so the oversight is making sure that we are doing things within the prescripts of the law and or our mandate, and or in terms of the disciplinary code. That is the oversight as I see it in terms of IDEC and or its employees.
And there was no oversight up until the judge is appointed to deal with oversight. There's no need to be defensive. There was no oversight. That's why now there is an appointment of a judge to make sure there's an oversight, key amongst others to avoid abuse of power by those who are at ADIC.
So, Chair, nothing to defend. I can merely indicate what processes we had in the NPA at the time, from the time the ID was proclaimed in 2019. It had the labor provisions and discipline issues were dealt with there. There are matters where criminal dockets could have been opened, and those would have been investigated outside, either by the detectives or the DPCI chair. In terms of the ethics and accountability, they also fell within the labor division, and then we also had risk and security. So in terms of the general oversight, that was the NPA's mechanisms to deal with the oversight issues. In terms of mandate, Honorable Malema, I'm sure that there would have been criminal allegations that could have been laid by anyone who was aggrieved and felt that IDEC had acted, or the ID acted outside of its mandate, but there wasn't a judge. I do agree with you.
There was no oversight as we have it now. That what we have now was not there.
Correct.
To tell us about labor, to tell us even at the Chisanyama, there is a process of dealing with labor issues without having any oversight. So there was no oversight as we have it now.
So maybe if you'd allow me, Honorable Malema, I agree that we now have a judge. However, we were not allowed to do as we pleased if that is the contention. I can only refer to the mechanisms that were in the NPA that were applicable to the ID and IDAC at the time. But you are correct, we only have a judge now.
We only have an oversight by a judge now,
That
which
is
we
correct.
didn't have.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Honorable Nhlanhla, you're fine.
No, Chair, we're not. And I take a particular interest in this matter because I'm the chairperson.
Honorable Malema, are you satisfied? Okay. You still want to pursue it, Honorable Nhlanhla?
Yes, Chair. Maybe to put it differently, I'm failing to understand what Advocate Johnson is trying to brief us on. Oversight. The point is, where did IDEC report between 2019 and October 2025? It's about close to 6 years now. What was the oversight mechanism in place at that particular time?
Let's do it this way. Advocate Johnson, the first question is, where did you report between 2019 and October 2025?
Honorable Chair and members, the accountability for IDEC, the head of IDEC reports to the National Director in terms of its work and in terms of that oversight, if we want to use that word. So the accountability mechanism for IDEC at the time is in the Office of the National Director.
Next question.
I'm fine, Chair. We'll pursue it further later.
Okay, thank you so much. SC, you may proceed. Thank you so much.
In the short period that Judge Nhlanhla has been in office, has been appointed, has he received any complaints? And if so, what are the nature of these complaints?
None that we've been made aware of, Chair.
Do you meet with the judge from time to time? Have you met with him since his appointment in October?
No, Chair, we have not.
Is the public aware of his appointment and where to direct any complaints?
Chair, I can only answer in the following way. Judge has been appointed by the Minister of Justice. I'm not sure what his terms of reference are yet, how they've worked that out. But there should be a public indication of the fact that there is a judge. The judge would have to give us the terms of reference, or they should be published through the Department of Justice by the Office of the Minister or the Director General, because that is where the judge sits. What his terms of reference would be, the complaints mechanism, how they report matters, who reports matters. The judge does not account to IDEC at all, or the NPA, but accounts within the Department of Justice.
When and how would the judge's appointment have been made public and announced in the media?
I am unable to assist, Chair. I'm not aware of what the plans of the Department of Justice are to ensure that the public is aware, but it is a critical aspect that the public should be made aware of because that talks to accountability. People need to know where to go to if they have any complaints about IDEC on its staff, and what the nature of those complaints and or the format should be for the reporting of complaints to the judge.
Would you be able to comment or not on whether senior members of police management or other law enforcement agencies, would they have been aware of his appointment?
I'm unable to comment, sir.
Can we just deal briefly with your experience in two of the more high-profile matters of former or the late General Jackie Selebi and Mr. Solly Lazarus, and their prosecution for corruption, just by way of short background?
Honourable Chair and members, I deal with it very broad strokes at paragraphs 25, 26 and 27 of the affidavit. And just based on our experience, mine included with criminal cases against the late Mr. Jackie Selebi, and it was also with Mr. Solly Lazarus with SAPS procurement, and now with SAPS procurement matters in IDEC. It seems that when the police, and this is in general, not a specific unit, regardless of which component, invites bids for the procurement of services or goods, many people want to participate because they've come to know that the contracts can be very large, and we've seen that play itself out as well in public. They're lucrative. And in terms of the prosecution and investigation in the corruption matter involving the then Chief Financial Officer of Crime Intelligence, Mr. Lazarus, who currently serves a term of imprisonment, Lazarus demonstrated what I referred to above. And during this process, at the time we were in the DSO, it became very apparent, and this is not passage talk, it became apparent through the investigation that officials had learned that if Mr. Lazarus asked something, people were reluctant to say no, because he was the CFO. If you wanted something, the CFO got it for you. So you didn't stand in the way of the CFO, and I'm talking about at the time. That specific CFO and others came up with several schemes to ensure gratification to and from parties relevant to the entire procurement and acquisition process. As an example, in one of the main charges against the then CFO, Mr. Lazarus, was they procured vehicles, covert vehicles, and vehicles for crime intelligence. Part of that was him ensuring that his kickback was getting vehicles, one of which he got for his daughter, for which he was charged, and one of which he got for his family members. So there wasn't procurement for procurement and procurement for services for its officials to be able to do the work. At that time, in that specific instance, there was always, what can I get out of it? And those were the instances that we were able to actively pick up in relation to Mr. Lazarus.
Then, just to move on also briefly, because you've already touched on it to a large extent, the role of crime intelligence in the whole criminal justice system, and how important that is.
So,
that you deal with it at paragraphs 28 to 30.
Chair, we must make no mistake that crime intelligence is integral to the fight against crime. It is something that we've always worked with as prosecutors and investigators, especially in the work that I did in my portfolio of dealing with organized crime matters. The DPCI, when the DSO was disbanded, I would attend a lot of their project committee meetings. That is where they discuss which projects to take on, etc. A continued argument that we always had with the DPCI was, if you do not have a credible crime threat analysis from crime intelligence, it is really difficult for you to register projects. And we say that because crime intelligence is very good at coming up, especially for organized crime, with credible crime threat analysis. And this was at the time when we were dealing with organized crime, which I dealt with up until February of 2022. And so it is so that they play a very important role, Honorable Chair, in that they provide for a system that allows for a very credible report of information, which is called a crime threat analysis. It informs law enforcement agencies across the board about possible groupings and syndicates, their criminal activities, the commodities that they may be trading in, and other relevant information. They also deal with transnational organized crime, and so a crime threat analysis from crime intelligence won't restrict itself just to the borders, but if there was something that we needed to know about these syndicates operating outside of our borders, they made that part of the crime threat analysis. I've said it helped investigators and prosecutors, and crime intelligence, without a doubt, is critical to the fight against crime, especially organized crime. I think the only challenge that was found, and that was only based on the Celebi matter that we did, the matter against Solly Lazarus, there was a matter against one Mr. Richard Mkhwanazi, but I haven't dealt with that matter. As critical as their function is, the key challenge that was found during those investigations is accountability for the use of its funds. And unfortunately, secrecy characterizes the utilization of the funds and the procurement. And like I say, Honorable Chair, this was encountered since the time of the Celebi investigation, and we found that fast forward into the Lazarus and the Mkhwanazi era. So I think out of all of this, one hopes that even with this committee, that one finds a balance between their mandate, how it's executed, protecting its COVID mandate, but still that there be accountability for its funding and funding mechanism. And the reason for that, Chair, is not because we need to know about their money. It helps ensure the accountability mechanism, and so that there's no abuse of funds within that system, whether it is for personal gain or otherwise.
Thank you. Can we just move to Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi? Do you know him? How well do you know him?
I guess well is relative, but I've known him for a long time in terms of knowing of him. But in March of 2020, and for about a period of 3 months, I got to work every day with Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. It was during the period of COVID. He chaired what was called the National Core Command Group, which was a group of generals from the various police components. There were people from the Department of Health. I represented the NPA, etc. And what would happen there, Honorable Chair and members, is when regulations came out, we would have to sit together to see how they would be operationalized, the kind of standing orders SAPS would send, and the kind of provisions we would have to send to the prosecutors for the prosecution and investigation of certain matters. So he chaired that meeting. We saw him every day. It was very seldom that General Mkhwanazi did not chair the meeting. It was the odd occasion. But he was there. He's very boots on the ground, committed individual. So I've worked with him in that environment. I came to know of him being the acting National Police Commissioner, but Honorable Chair and members, we didn't engage on that platform. And now in my time as in IDAC, we did engage with General Mkhwanazi. In my time as IDAC, when these investigations of the matters that were referred to IDAC by Mr. Adams, out of habit, what one does is when investigators go into a province and they are going to see police personnel, you will inform the police commissioner, provincial commissioner, as do prosecutors when they appear in a jurisdiction of a director of public prosecutions. So investigators would inform General Mkhwanazi that they were in his province, that they were seeing police officials as potential witnesses. They also, one of the investigators also engaged him, Honorable Chair and members, when we needed issues of clarity. And that is as far as the engagement goes. And the last engagement I had personally with Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi was during the month of June. He had called, and I was away for work and unable to take the call. When I called back, he said, "Not urgent, we'll talk when you get back." I guess we both got busy. General then did speak to me on the 2nd of July, and on the 2nd of July, it is when the General indicated that he wanted me to talk to somebody about an issue. He sent me the details, but unfortunately, before I don't call anyone. I usually give it to the head of operations, Mr. Sissoko. But before I could do that, the 6th of July media expose by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi happened, and that was the ambit of our engagements. Our engagements stopped on the 2nd of July.
Now, he makes reference to one of your investigators, Mr. Brian Padiachi. Can you tell us a bit about that? Or let me just put to you two allegations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi in his affidavit. He says a further condition is that if the accused required anything related to their work, it could only be obtained through the intervention of the investigating officer. This is in relation to Lieutenant General Nkumalo, Senior Investigator Brian Padiachi of IDAC, and then later on he says, having regard to the sensitive nature of Lieutenant General Nkumalo's role, a condition empowering Mr. Padiachi to have any access to crime intelligence information is unwarranted. It compromises state security. Lieutenant General Nkumalo has applied for the bail conditions to be amended, but the hearing of this application to amend has been postponed on numerous occasions. So just in relation to, we're going to deal with Lieutenant General Nkumalo's arrest and the charges against him. Yeah. You deal with it from paragraph 56 onwards, allegations against Mr. Brian Padiachi.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members. To go back to the assertion that you made, Council, I am aware...
Not that I make.
That General Mkhwanazi makes that you've put to me. The assertion being that Mr. Padiachi would have and be allowed to have access to CI and documents. It is, I think it's incorrectly interpreted. That condition dealt with, and mainly because we have witnesses at crime intelligence, and those witnesses had indicated that they had been intimidated and victimized. So the condition for them not going to CI was to ensure that the witnesses were not intimidated. Mr. Padiachi would not have been allowed, to be clear, to access any documents from crime intelligence. We would have had to follow, if after that one identified that there were documents from crime intelligence that were required, Chair, we would have had to follow the process we had followed initially, which would have been to issue a Section 28 subpoena to the National Police Commissioner. No one would have been allowed to go to CI, engage any personnel, or take on any documents. And when it comes to Mr. Padiachi, it is Mr. Padiachi who, in fact, would call Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi to let him know that he was going to be in his province. It was him who engaged with the Lieutenant General mainly. They met, they would have talked. They had meetings, they had WhatsApp exchanges about Mr. Padiachi going down to KZN and what it is that he would require. And General Mkhwanazi was always willing to assist and or to facilitate. I'm not sure what might have gone wrong, because I'm not aware of anything having gone wrong. But when the allegations are made, Honorable Chair and members, that Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi cannot understand what Padiachi is doing at IDEC. I found Mr. Padiachi at the ID. He had come to the ID and had been sought after by my predecessor, Advocate Hermione Cronje, and he remained then at IDEC. He did undergo a detective course. He has conducted several investigations in his time in the South African Police Services. He wasn't only at crime intelligence. We do refer, Honorable Chair and members, from paragraphs 62.1 up to paragraph 62.3 of specific matters that Mr. Padiachi dealt with as an investigator within the South African Police Services in his time at the South African Police Services. So the assertion that he's got no investigating experience and no one knows what he's doing there is incorrect. He has the requisite qualifications, he's had the requisite experience, and he was at IDEC from sometime in 2021, me having taken office in March of 2022, and has conducted investigations as part of different teams that were doing investigations in IDEC.
Thank you. Honourable Chair, may I just request a short adjournment? There's some, you would have seen some activity, there's some documents that I wish to refer the witness to, and which is not part of Ms. Johnson's statement.
That
so
is-
that committee members...
That is granted, SC. We will come back at 11:45.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you.